Once upon a time, in the heart of the busy market, a mad woman danced barefoot, her laughter echoing as children giggled and pointed. Nancy froze, her stomach tightening. Wait, isn't that Dorcas, our high school prom queen? She had beauty, brains, everything. What happened to her? Abigail leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. They say she lost her mind after what happened with the turtle, but that's not the whole story. Let me tell you what really happened. Dorcas had endured heartbreak after heartbreak, each one leaving deeper scars. Dorcas had even stopped attending family gatherings, but it didn't stop the phone calls. The calls always ended in disappointment, leaving Dorcas feeling even more alone. Things got worse when her aunt tried to marry her off to a 70-year-old village chief. Don't worry, her aunt assured her. This one is called Don't Mind the Body, Mind the Engine. His langa langa still works. You'll be fine. In no time, you'll have beautiful babies. Dorcas laughed at the time, but deep down, she wondered, was this really her fate? Was love truly out of reach for her? Dorcas fell in love with Kingsley at first sight, and he swept Dorcas off her feet in no time. He checked all her boxes: wealthy, handsome, and with a deep voice that melted her insides anytime he spoke. Within 2 months, he went down on one knee and proposed. Dorcas believed her struggles were finally over and immediately put their wedding plans in motion. But just when she thought her fairy tale was beginning, everything fell apart. One evening, Kingsley sat her down. Babe, we need to talk. Her heart sank. We have to cancel the wedding. For now, he said softly. My goods at the port were seized, and I need the bulk of the wedding funds I set aside to clear them. Let's hold off for just a year, he pleaded. I promise, by then, I'll have raised enough money for the lavish wedding you deserve. Babe, you're an Odogu's babe. Our wedding must be the talk of the town. Dorcas blinked in disbelief. Kingsley, I have some money saved, she said. How about I help clear the goods at the port? I'll even sponsor the wedding for now, and you can reimburse me later. I'm your partner. I should support you at all times. Reluctantly, Kingsley agreed. A week after, she decided to surprise Kingsley at his mansion. As she stepped inside, an elegant elderly woman stopped her at the entrance. Young lady, don't you have manners? Who taught you to walk into someone's home without knocking? And who even let you in? Musa, Musa, the woman yelled. Dorcas froze as Musa came running, sweaty and nervous. But to her shock, Musa was no other than her beloved Kingsley. Kingsley? Dorcas gasped, her voice trembling. Who is Musa? What's going on here? The older woman turned to Musa, then burst out laughing. Not you too. Musa, again? I traveled for just 4 months and you do this again? What did he tell you? Was he an oil magnate this time? I hope you didn't give him any money. Dorcas felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Did you ever love me? Dorcas said, grabbing her chest. Where's my money? She screamed, tears streaming down her face. That was my life savings. Musa dropped to his knees, refusing to speak. Young lady, the older woman said, shaking her head. If you gave him money, he spent it by now. He can gamble it all away in one day. Shattered and humiliated, Dorcas called the police, and Musa, Kingsley, whatever his name was arrested. The betrayal broke her. She fell into a deep depression, locking herself inside her home for months. She refused to meet anyone, not even her best friend, Nanny. Then one day, Anne got a frantic call at work. Dorcas's neighbors had seen smoke pouring out of her house. When they broke in, they found Dorcas unconscious and rushed her to the hospital. By the time Anne arrived at the hospital, only one question was on her mind. Had Dorcas tried to end it all? Dorcas, what were you thinking? Anne's voice trembled as tears filled her eyes. Over a man? No, you can't let this break you. There are brighter days ahead. A living dog is better than a dead lion. You can't give up like this. Dorcas remained silent, staring blankly at the ceiling. "You're coming with me," Anne stated firmly. "I won't take no for an answer. I need you, and you need me. Derek and I will take care of you. I'm heavily pregnant. I could use the company. And you need to be somewhere safe, where I can see you every day and make sure you are okay." It took endless pleading, but Dorcas finally agreed to move in with Nene and Derek. For a while, things seemed to stabilize. Enne's warm home wrapped Dorcas in temporary comfort, her laughter slowly returning as she bonded with the couple. But just as hope began to bloom, disaster struck again. Anne's brakes failed on her way home from her prenatal appointment, leaving Derek and Dorcas shattered. As time passed, grief brought Derek and Dorcas closer. A year after Nine's passing, Derek's family and friends began to urge him to move on. "It's not good for a man to be alone, Derek," they insisted. "You're still young, and it's been a year already. Settle down with Dorcas. She's been here all along. You know her, and Neil loved her. She'd want you two together." Derek, torn between his grief and the pressure from those around him, hesitated. How could he move on so soon after losing Nan? How could he open his heart to someone else, especially someone who had been so intertwined in their lives? But the quiet, relentless insistence of his family wore him down. Finally, he relented. They had a modest civil wedding. Soon after, they were blessed with a baby girl, and in honor of Nene, they named her after the woman who had once been the heart of their small family. It was a bittersweet joy. Baby Anne brought light and laughter into their home. When Dorcas returned to work after her maternity leave, she hired a nanny through an agency. Mariam seemed heaven sent, polite, attentive, and instantly likable. She quickly earned their trust. But as the weeks rolled by, baby Nan began to change. The bubbly, giggling baby turned quiet and anxious. Her laughter faded into whimpers. To make matters worse, Mrs. Tayo, their elderly neighbor, pulled Dorcas aside one evening when she was returning home from work. Her voice quivered with urgency. "Dorcas, in the afternoon, when you and your husband are not around, your baby cries incessantly." "Your baby's cries? They're different," she said, eyes filled with concern. "That's not the sound of a baby who's upset. It's fear. Dorcas, something is terribly wrong. You need to find out what's wrong with your daughter before it's too late." Dorcas began to worry, but when she questioned Mariam, she reassured her, saying, "Baby Nan is just teething, Ma. All babies get fussy when they're teething." One afternoon, Dorcas couldn't shake the gnawing sense of dread any longer. She left work early, parking her car a few houses down and approaching her home quietly. As she neared the door, baby Nan's piercing scream sliced through the air, sending chills down her spine. Dorcas's heart hammered in her chest as she opened the front door. What she saw made her blood run cold. Baby Anne was in her walker, her tiny face streaked with tears as she wailed helplessly. But it was what loomed over her that froze Dorcas in place. A monstrous figure, a towering turtle-like creature with a jagged cracked shell, hovered menacingly, its glowing yellow eyes locked onto the crying child. Dorcas clutched the door handle, her knees threatening to buckle. "Jesus, help me," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper against the terrified cries echoing inside. The creature head snapped toward her. Before Dorcas could scream, the monster began to shift. Its jagged shell cracked and collapsed inward, its rough, scaly skin rippling and melting into smooth flesh. In mere moments, the monstrous turtle was gone. Standing in its place was Mariam, the nanny. Her face was calm, and her lips curled into a slow, twisted smile. "You shouldn't have come home early, madam," Mariam said, her voice as cold as ice. Dorcas's knees wobbled, but she forced herself to move. With trembling hands, she pushed baby Nene's walker away from Mariam, shielding her daughter. "You're not human," Dorcas choked out, tears streaming down her face. Well, Dorcas, or should I call you Adobia?" Mariam stated coldly as she circled Dorcas like a predator. Dorcas's heart froze. "Adobia?" Only one person had ever referred to her by that name, and the blood drained from her face as recognition hit her. The room seemed to spin. Just then, Derek walked in, his voice cheery. "Honey, you're home. I let my..." His words faltered as he took in the scene. His eyes widened as they shifted from Dorcas, Mariam, and then to baby Nan, still tear-soaked but calm now. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion and concern. "Good, you're here," Mariam said, her voice sounding oddly familiar. "Will you confess, or shall I do the telling?" She turned her icy gaze to Dorcas. "Confess? Confess what?" Derek asked, stepping closer, still not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. Tears poured down Dorcas's face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she sobbed, her words coming in broken gasps. "The guilt has been eating me alive. I don't know what came over me. I saw how happy you both were, and she said, choking on her shame. "I just got so tired of being alone. Somehow, I started to fall for Derek. I started wondering what it would feel like to have a love like yours." Mariam's face twisted with anger and sorrow as she stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "I loved you like a sister. I would have done anything for you, Dorcas. I was so worried about you that I brought you into my home. And how did you repay me?" Mariam's voice quivered with fury. "You chose to get rid of me and my unborn baby and take over my home. How could you?" Mariam screamed, her voice echoing with all the pain and loss she'd suffered. I'm sorry. Nay, forgive me," Dorcas cried, collapsing to her knees in front of Mariam. Her voice was filled with anguish and regret as she reached out, her hands trembling. Derek stood frozen, confusion written across his face as he looked between the two women. "Nay, why would you call her Dorcas? What's going on here? What are you both talking about?" "Tell him!" Mariam screamed, her voice filled with a mixture of rage and sorrow. Dorcas sobbed, her head dropping in shame. She nodded, her words barely escaping her lips. I tampered with her brakes. I'm sorry, Derek." Derek's eyes widened in horror. "You tampered with whose brakes?" he asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Nin's brakes," Dorcas whispered. Derek's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" he whispered, his breath shallow. "You mean to say you killed my wife and our unborn child?" His voice trembled with shock and disgust. Dorcas didn't respond, only nodded silently, her tears falling like rain. Derek staggered back, unable to comprehend what he was hearing. "Oh my goodness, how could you? She was nothing but good to you. She worried about you every day. We brought you into our home and you did this to us." The realization slowly dawned on him, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Meh," he whispered, turning his gaze slowly toward Mariam, his face filled with a mix of confusion and fear. Mariam's tear-filled eyes met his. She nodded, her lips trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I had no part in this," Derek said, his voice wavering. "I know," Mariam whispered. "I have nothing against you, Derek. I just needed to expose her." Mariam continued, her voice now carrying the weight of Nay's pain. "This vile woman can't live my life." And with that, Mariam collapsed, passing out in front of them. Derek stood frozen, his thoughts jumbled and his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, Dorcas burst into laughter. Wild, manic laughter filled the room. Derek turned toward her, eyes narrowing in confusion. "What's so funny?" he asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. Dorcas looked at him with a sinister smile. "The turtle, it's for you?" she mocked, her laughter echoing in the room as she danced around. Before Derek could say another word, Dorcas bolted toward the door, laughing hysterically. Her footsteps faded into the distance as she ran out of the house, leaving Derek standing there, stunned and utterly bewildered. That was the last time he saw her, the weight of her actions hanging in the air. He didn't know if he was more confused or terrified, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. Nancy stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief as Abigail recounted the dark deeds of Dorcas. "Oh my God," Nancy gasped, her voice trembling with shock. "Some people can be so heartless," she added, shaking her head in disbelief and disappointment. She couldn't tear her gaze away from Dorcas, who was still dancing erratically, lost in her own twisted world. Nancy's heart ached for the betrayal and cruelty that had been carried out on Nan and her family. The moral of the story is that betrayal, jealousy, and selfishness can lead to devastating consequences, and that the truth always finds a way to surface. Trust, love, and loyalty are powerful forces that should never be taken for granted. And sometimes, the darkest secrets are revealed when we least expect them. Hi fam, thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed this story. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you. Click the link on the right to dive into yet another captivating tale. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss any of your favorite African folk tales. Until next time, it's bye from us at Apenthene African Stories.